Hello, and welcome to tonight's episode of The Southern Bannermen, a podcast where we will present a particularly pleasant pile of plots. Our prestigious panel includes myself, Calm Over Westeros, Matt Edelman, Retaliation, Ben Davey, and Nothing Burns Like James Walmsley. Now, take it away, Ben.
Nothing burns like James Walmsley, I love that one. Hi guys, welcome to episode 29 of The Southern Bannermen. In this episode, we've all done top 10 lists of plots, and, well, we're going to do that. We're just going to tell you what they are, and have a discussion, and talk about what are the best plots in the game. Mm-hmm. Spoiler alert, it's not Summons to Court. Don't know what everyone else feels about that.
Are you sure about that?
I'd like to change my list one second.
Yeah. Are you sure about that? I guess I need to, revise my list downwards.
I mean, I'd love to say it is, and then sell like the 25 old art copies I currently have. But no, and sadly it isn't.
Like insider trading on alt art. Big up the cards on your podcast to try and create a buzz.
It's actually a really good idea. Yeah.
When we did, was it Trial by Combat? The shop gave us a load of extra packs, OP kits, and I think I had 32 of those to give away. I went home with 28 of them because no one wanted them. I was literally like, please just take them. Like, no, everyone's like, no, I'm fine, mate. You got a problem. Stop. Yeah. I'll take one because I know one of my friends doesn't have it and he wants to have a collection, but no, back off.
All right, so Ben, what will be the format of this show?
So
our top 10 lists.
We're going to start at 10, and we're going to go around. We'll all tell us what our 10th plot is. Then we'll go on to the 9th one in the same order and go all the way up to the best plot in the game in our opinions. You'll probably disagree.
Summons to Court.
Summons to Court. It is Summons to Court. Yes, there you go. Well, that's it. It's podcast over, guys.
And on that bombshell.
Yeah, on that bombshell. and then we'll go. Then we'll have a discussion. We've got some honourable mentions. Kind of peek behind the curtains. This is the second attempt at one of these podcasts. The first one failed. Yay!
No, it succeeded. The recording succeeded.
No,
but then the recording itself failed.
Yeah.
Okay.
The episode succeeded.
The session succeeded.
Yeah, if you're wondering why we're doing plots, it's because we didn't fancy sitting around for a couple of hours doing characters again.
No. Which is why we're going to redo characters in the future in a different format to make it to keep it the intrigue there a little bit.
Yeah, I think, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, the plan is to just sort of have these as an occasional episode.
Yeah.
Inevitably, they're going to turn out to be big hits, especially when we tell the audience that we want them to submit their top 10 list so we can determine a community agreed upon top 10 list.
Yes,
and it's going to be such a major hit. Then we're going to get bought by ITV, and then we're going to become big stars, and that'll be that. Yeah, we're going to have our own British panel show.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ben. The plan is to encourage people to get their top 10 lists submitted after the episode, and then before the next episode we collate them and we can announce what the community top 10 is for that subject.
Exactly. That is the exact plan.
In this case, we'll be able to find out what, that the community also thinks Summon to Court is the best plot, and then also find out what their 2 through 10 are.
Yeah. It's pretty much there, just forget. Just do your 2 to 10. We can fill in the rest.
Yeah.
Or why don't we just accept that Southern to Court is like tier 0? It's just like it's S tier. It's above the top 10.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. So we're ranking the top 10 that aren't Summons to Court.
Summon to Court. Summon to Court is tier 0.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Right then. I guess we better get started. So, who wants to go first?
James does.
Okay.
James does. Okay. So my 10th best plot in the Game of Thrones, the card game, 2nd edition, is Wardens of the South.
Ooh.
And I'm unsure about this, to be honest, myself, which is a really good start to bigging it up as the 10th best plot in the game. There was quite a bit of competition for that spot. And in the end, I went with Wardens simply because I think that more than any other card, that was the card that pushed Tyrell constructive stuff over the top, even more than, like, say, the High Tower or trying to get other cards from that box, like Mace. Even more than these sorts of cards, I think having that round where it was just like, well, this is the round in which I'm going to win the challenges.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
agree. It's incredible.
When it came out, I underestimated that card quite a bit. I thought that it was of a similar level to some of the other cards I've got in my honourable mentions, and honourable mentions for the honourable mentions. And it's a bit better than them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think this plot is actually really good. There was a game recently I had flipped this in Crossing with two Apple Nights Out and Renly.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's basically 5 challenges I've won. Mm-hmm. Pretty much, unless you're going to overcommit to the hilt. That I just got so much power. And then there was a point where I done all my challenges and everything's standing. Go on then, do some challenges at me. Give me renowned.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's not just that you win all the challenges. It's that you win all the challenges out of a faction where you can have like 4 or 5 characters with renown on the table at a given time.
Yeah. And then there's also all the synergy with stand effects like Randall Tarley and Highguard and Courtier.
Yeah, because this is a trigger after. Yeah, as you go in, and it's because this is why I think this. Because there's a lot of argument what's better, this or Song of Summer, because they're similar S effects, but Song of Summer, that blanket, you're always +1. And then there's a few situations that is better. Mm-hmm. But for Tyrell, who have a lot of triggers about boosting strength, this is definitely
the one.
Yeah, the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this plot was a very instrumental part in my, epic run to the top 8 of Stalek, only to be stopped by James. My builders are 30 strength Walmsley.
That's the other thing with this. So Reigns is actually one of the decks this can be a bit of a liability in, because if you're not careful, you end up flipping out of it too early because you trigger Reigns. I have almost done that once. I have done that once, I'm pretty sure, on stream as well. I've done a challenge going, oh no, I don't want to flip out of this. This is a good plot.
Yeah, but on the same side, one of the downsides of the plot is that it's only got 5 reserve, and being able to
6 reserve.
Come on, I thought it was 5.
The image right in front of me says 6.
Well, okay. In that case, ignore the point I was about to make.
Yeah,
it's going to be.
It also is really nice for setting up your epic, turn that involves, turning on Reigns of Castamere at the right time, because of the amount of strength it can give your side, when making your intrigue challenge.
And an important one is also the traits. The fact it's just summer traded, there's very little counter to that. It's not like if there isn't, and also unlike those other summer plots, it doesn't say if there's winter plots, blah blah blah. It's literally just no, this is summer and this works.
Yeah, and that's appropriate because it works with Arbor Vineyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can make a big. What I would do at Stalek a lot, even though I wasn't running Arbor Vineyard, is I would flip Wardens of the South. I'd play Randall Tarley, and then I'd just go to town, for like all 3 of my challenges. Yeah, and gain a whole bunch of power. Yeah. It's super good. Yeah.
Cool. So Matt, your number 10.
Yeah. So my number 10 has been a largely essential slot since the core set, and that is, well, let's just throw it out there. It's Confiscation. Milk of the Poppy has been in the game since the core set. Now we have things like Seal of the Hand. Well, we always had Seal of the Hand, which is a great positive attachment, but we've always had things like, well, now we have things like Craven and the Martell Icon Strippers. These things are really nasty, and if you have no way of dealing with negative attachments, that could be a really big problem. I admit Confiscation has kind of fallen out of favor a bit, especially since Greyjoy and Targaryen don't really rely on attachments very much. So, and it can often be like a totally dead card where you have to flip it and hit one of your own positive attachments. So, in the core meta, it was like absolutely 100% essential. Nowadays, it's probably less essential, but still pretty good. But its importance to the game, and its importance to the game can't be denied. I'm going to throw a little asterisk by this. Depending on the setup of your deck and the meta game that you're expecting, Confiscation can often be replaced by Nothing Burns Like the Cold in order to, depending on the meta you're expecting and what your deck looks like.
Yeah. The issue with that is the opponent chooses.
This is true, but often if you're going up against...
people have multiple attachments out.
There is, well... See, the argument I have is either you see very few attachments or you see lots of... Like Night's Watch, you see a lot of attachments.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, if you're countering to Night's Watch, and you go, I'm not going to take your Craven off your Round entirely, I'm going to take my... I will just lose a Practice Blade or...
Dagger or whatever, yeah.
This
is true. That's why I said this is very meta dependent.
Yeah.
And very much dependent on your deck. Nothing Burns can also deal with random flea bottoms and stuff, which is kind of very common these days. Like everybody runs like some sort of non-limited. So it's really about what your deck is designed to do and what you think you're going to go up against, whether you do Confiscation or Nothing Burns Like the Cold.
Yeah, I think you summarized the pros of Confiscation very well. You actually missed out the main reason why I don't have it in my list. As a spoiler, if this was a year ago, it definitely would have been high up in my list, but it's dropped off for me, and the main reason it's dropped off for me is the Iron Bank will have its due.
Yeah, that helps with clearing the negative ones.
Negative attachments are so much more common than positives. I know we were just talking before we went on air about how good Seal of the Hand is, but it's still relatively niche. And otherwise, that and Bodyguard are about the only positive attachments you see on a consistent basis.
Well, I don't know. You see Dragonglass Daggers. That seems to be pretty common in some Night's Watch. And then you have, like, Corsair's Dirks from time to time.
Not so much now. Corsair's Dirk was good. It was, I know what you're saying. The other one is obviously you can take off, like, the Long Claw off the Night's Watch, like Jon Snow or something, which they tend to not run as many of, so you can be a bit more choosy. The thing I think is there's a lot more decks that are about resetting the board, and a lot of the good negative attachments are non-terminal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the less the key that characters get in both directions, the worse confiscation gets, because the worse attachments get.
Yeah.
I guess it's deck dependent. Like if you're running a deck that's entirely focused on Mace Tyrell, you need a way to deal with Cook of the Poppy.
Yeah, it's definitely not a dead plot. Like when I was playing around with Mace, I definitely had Confiscation in my deck because a milk on Mace can screw you.
I think I agree with Wham. I think this was about a year ago. This is probably in my top 5. Right now, it's still a good plot, but it's not necessarily a plot I would consider. But I can completely understand why you have it on your list.
Yeah, it used to be the case when I was building decks that, like, I think it was like Ben said when we were talking about Nothing Burns a moment ago, that I wouldn't want to have only a couple of attachments in my deck. I'd either want to have 0 or I'd want to have 5 or more.
Yeah.
Because of the assumption that every single deck would be running Confiscation, and that if you only have a couple, then you're just enabling that plot for them.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I actually am happy to only run a couple of attachments, just because Confiscation has waned somewhat.
Yeah.
But it's waned from being one of the absolute top 5 best plots in the game, so it's definitely still worthy of being in the conversation.
It's something that it takes up. Confiscation is a plot slot that you actually have to consider when building your deck. You can't just ignore Confiscation completely.
Yes,
I would say.
No, it's definitely, and I think a lot of the plots that make my list are plots that you need to be thinking about while you're playing the game. Mm-hmm. And this is definitely fits that criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Okay. So number 10, Confiscation with a little asterisk. In parentheses, Nothing Burns Like the Cold.
So
that's how my list got bigger than 10.
So my number 10, and I technically cheated here a little bit because I've used it from a pack we hadn't agreed to use.
Oh.
The King in the North.
Yeah.
The King in the North.
The King in the North.
I had a bit of a
I don't think that's cheating. We're recording this after the release of Pack 4.
That's true. I think when we did the character one, we agreed not to use Kingsmoot. So yeah.
Doesn't matter. King of the North.
King of the North. I had a bit of a go at this at the weekend, and I might be overinflating this on recency biased, but and a deck I have been enjoying, the Boy King Blackfish. This is awesome. Just not being able to get... you've got Astapor. No, I'm sorry, you can't use Astapor. You want to stand with that Seal of the Hand? No, I'm sorry, you can't. Oh, Sir Gregor's Pillage, one of my best characters. No.
Nope. Oh, yeah.
And I think the even bigger thing for me is being able to use it against, like, a Valor and say, your bodyguards that you're planning on using here. Your Iron Mines that you're planning on using here. No, you don't have a Kingmate, so...
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's very refreshing to see. It's very refreshing to see a plot that it's something that is on demand. It's something that every faction can use to various levels of effectiveness, of course, because depending on whether you have kings or not. But it's nice to have countermeasures against decks that have a lot of triggered effect shenanigans.
And that's the one that really did this. That's the game I was playing against Martel, and on that critical turn, flopping this out. And then my opponent going, "Oh, I can't stop you this turn, can I?" I'm like, "No, nope." The Blackfish is about to get its 4th power from this this minstrel I have in my hand, and unless you've got nightmares, I'm going to town, and I've won, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah,
the number of things that it's good against is really staggering. Like, it stops the saves, like we were saying. It stops triggering limited economy.
Yeah, that's the big one.
It stops those on the board, those persistent location triggers like your Gaston Grey, your Astapor, the Wall,
High Tower,
Mace Tyrell for that matter.
I'm already envisioning a Barrow deck which does the Withering Cold so they don't stand, and then they'll have the next turn, and the turn after that you play this.
Yeah,
and you basically they get no econ for two of those 3
rounds. They get 1 round where they can actually trigger econ.
What I've also discovered in the very couple, like I played very few games with King of the North so far because I've been I just came from a weekend of
where it wasn't
not
legal.
This pack, where it wasn't legal. So I found that against passive power decks like Night's Watch or say Martel Stag or even Mace to an extent. If you can stretch their required time to win the game, over into the 8th or 9th plot, then you get King of the North to work twice. And you can often reliably expect King of the North to deny 2 turns because it's going to take them that long, for their passive power strategy to get to 15, thanks to your interference through say Withering Cold or King of the North.
Now, the big thing I like about this plot, and I think it's been very well designed, is that you have quite a specific trigger point. You need a king.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't. This is not just a plot that fits in every deck. But if you have a king or ways of making people kings, say for instance Tyrell, probably you run 2 crowns and maybe 3 Renleys.
Yeah.
You just you get to do it, and it's just quite easy to do. But there's also quite counter. Your opponent has a king. It doesn't work so well. But king tech isn't that common, really. It might become more common now.
Yeah, this is one thing that I actually have against it, as a mark against it, is that it's like Winterfell in that you don't actually need to run kings, or in the case of Winterfell, Winter, to be able to utilize the denial aspect of the card. And if you have them, then it's even better that you don't have to worry about the downside of the card. But it's not what the card is about. What bothers me is that occasionally it will be useless.
Yes, I can.
Yeah,
I get that. But even if it's useless, it's still 5 gold to initiative. It's not the worst plot in the world to flip into and go, it's not really doing anything this turn, but never mind.
There are worse plots that I have on my list that when they're doing nothing or worse, then, they're worse off for you than a 5 gold blank plot is. So.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But cool. But I just kind of want to sort of talk about it because I think it's a great plot.
Yeah.
Props to Jacob.
Yeah. It's a great addition to the game, like I was saying before, because it gives you some countermeasures against a lot of triggered effect shenanigans. Okay.
Cool. Okay. So number 9, Monsieur Wamar.
Yeah. So on the subject of confiscation being top 5 if we'd done this a year ago, I think this would have been top 1 or 2 if we'd done this a year ago. And it has dropped off, but it is still a fantastic plot in several decks, and that plot is the first Snow of Winter. When we didn't have a full reset and you could just bounce all the chuds to make your claim hit harder things, ambush in a cheap thing, and then go march next round, it was meta-defining at that point. And it was one of the main reasons that Lanny Dragon was such a big force in the meta for for basically a year.
Yeah.
It's dropped off now in that bouncing all the chuds isn't necessarily a good thing because of resets and because we have Flea Bottom to be able to bounce things in afterwards. And this, like we were saying about characters not sticking on the board as much, a mass bounce tool isn't as powerful as it once was, but it is still pretty damn powerful.
Yeah, it can lead to some it can lead to some pretty insane blowouts, depending on how your opponent sets up.
Yeah.
But
I think it was a stream I was doing the other day. I was using my Tyrell Knights deck, and I got first no turn 1, and it completely crippled me.
mhm.
And there's a lot of mini curve decks these days, so this is quite a useful tool against those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. As it's become less important and meta-defining, in a way, it's become better.
Yes.
That people stop teching for it so much.
Yeah, I think when it came out in the early card pool, it was a bit too early because
It
the
was.
factions weren't. They just didn't have enough of a. Most of the factions didn't have enough of a card pool to be able to
It
build
was,
your
it
deck
was
to
too
deal with it.
powerful and important a card to
Yeah.
be that slanted towards certain factions.
Yeah,
If you were
exactly.
Lannister or Banner Lion or Martell or Banner Sun, then you could utilize it as a weapon, and otherwise you had to cower in fear from those mighty decks bouncing half your board back.
It completely crippled Night's Watch and Tyrell for about 6 months when it came out.
Yes.
And that's how good the card is. Two factions just basically disappeared from the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and even like it badly affected Targ as well.
Yeah.
It took Targ a lot of time to recover from it, and also Baratheon.
Yes.
They were able to benefit from having their Relore chuds bounced on the positive, but on the downside, it usually left them with just like Mel, Bob, Stannis, and maybe Davos if they were lucky.
Yeah.
Like if you can't stop the military claim that round, then Marched is gonna hurt you like a bugger.
And,
Yeah, exactly.
And smaller boards hurt Bob as well, because he doesn't get his massive strength buff for doing nothing.
Yeah, and it was basically Stark could cope because even though they had a Chud heavy board, they also had easy ways of duping. It let you get Summer back for an extra trigger. Septim Mordain and Lewin allowed Arya and Sansa to stick around anyway.
Arya normally had a dupe by default.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
once
once the Stark box came out, they were Stark was able to deal with it pretty well.
Yeah.
Which was a
And
similar
they came
time.
out around the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was mostly just, if you're Lannister or Martell, you will like this. If you are not, you will not. And that was a problem.
Yeah, I think even now it's still. I know it's definitely affected my deck building when it comes to the curve I look for. Like to personally, I try to aim for about at least 14 or so 4-cost or greater characters, just so I'm not like totally lopsided and totally get blasted by say first note winner.
I'm
You know?
going to be honest, I see it so little at the moment, which is a shame. And again, this is something that's come up a lot in my streams from comments, is when I've been running my Tyrell Knights, is that almost, if I see first snow, it's almost not impossible for me to win, but it makes the game a damn sight harder. But it happens so rarely.
Well, I think right now we're kind of in a fascination with Valor de Harris, and First Note Winter kind of fits in that same vein as Valor de Harris.
Well, it's a perfect counter to Ballad of Harris. Oh, you've left lots of chuds,
that's
have
true.
you? Okay, well, they're all back to your hand now.
Yeah.
Between those two cards, the 4-cost slot is becoming increasingly the best cost slot in the game, in that you're out of range of Valor de Harris, and you can keep 2 4-costers and a chud. Sorry, you're out of the range of First Snow, and on Valor de Harris you can keep 2 of them and a chud as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Cool. Matt?
Sure. So my number 9 is something that might seem kind of niche, but I think is worth including in a lot of decks, especially ones that are focused on very unique characters with interesting abilities, and that's Close Call. Close Call basically is it's your way of preventing yourself from getting blown out by like a heads on spikes against your like key character, or a put to the sword against your key character, or an unlucky 2-claim military on like turn 1 causing you to lose Stannis Baratheon, which happened to me this weekend. That was a problem.
Well, you've made the Brotherhood without manners stop listening to us now. So, kudos for that, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Did they ever listen to us?
Probably
I'm
not.
sure the number 1 on that podcast.
Yeah. So Close Call, it's got good stats in that it is 5 gold, 6 reserve, and it often draws your card as long as you time it to not be against a winner plot. But I think it's very important in that it can prevent you from getting totally blown out if you're playing a deck that relies on unique characters. It's often a good idea. I often use it as a plot for when we're in the middle of the game and I don't necessarily like really need a particular effect. It's a good way to like get myself a card and maybe put something back in the discard pile, so that way I can either use like Flea Bottom or have this unique in the discard pile instead of the dead pile so I can marshal it again.
Yeah, I think you hit on a very good point there in that one of the things I find myself most often using Close Call for is seeding my discard pile for Flea Bottom.
Yeah,
it does that too.
yeah. I think the classic example I've used it recently for was to Close Call Summer back, Flea Bottom Summer into play to bring Bran back into my hand for the next turn.
Yeah,
and then I think I then even Jon Snowed Summer.
Yeah,
to get him back in the discard pile.
Yeah, Summer is one of those optimal targets for that.
Yeah.
There with, like the Hound and stuff like that.
Yeah, the Hound as well. Yeah, there's quite a few cards. I know I've said there's other times where I've had some really powerful cards in the dead pile and I brought back a free coster because of Flea Bottom. So it's I agree it's good, but the only thing that the negative I have, and it's not that much of a negative because it is kind of a drawback. So it's a fallback scheme. Is the amount of times I just use it to draw a card.
Yeah, I mean, and which is not the worst thing in the world.
No, it's not. But it's still, yeah. In some games it saved my bacon. In other games it kind of feels like it could have been something better.
Yeah, I agree that can happen, but then you think of all the games where like your Melisandre gets hit by heads on spikes, and then it's like, oh my god, I got it.
or Crown of Golded first turn.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think what annoys me is quite often if I'm using it to draw an extra card, I find that that's the round my opponent plays a completely inconsequential winter plot.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you chose this round of all the rounds to play the Winds of Winter. Well, thank you very much.
The amount of times that I've counted Winter Festival with it without meaning to.
Yes.
And I'm actually annoyed. I'm like, you could have had the 2 power and it's a bloody card draw.
It is one of those plots that is quite good for sniping those more winter than summer or only winter type effects in the mid to late game.
Yeah,
this is true.
A lot of the summer plots you want to play in the first round or two. That one and one other that we might get to later tend to be more late game plots.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah,
So,
I think it's a very, very solid card. It's like I do sympathise with the people that say Close Call doesn't do enough. In that, if you don't see another copy of that unique character, or you didn't need to seed your part for Flea Bottom, then it is literally just 5 gold, draw a card.
The amount of time there were 2 good characters in the dead pile, and you're like, which one do I put in?
Oh yeah,
I'll put in this one, and then you draw the other one.
The other one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of people overrate it, in my opinion, but I think also a lot of people underrate it.
Is that a diplomatic way of saying I'm wrong?
No, I don't even think you're wrong. I mean, I'll tell you it's not in my top 10 list, but it is in my honourable mentions of the honourable mentions list, like Confiscation. So it's a card I considered. It's not like well, what on earth are you doing picking that? You've had a mare there, mate. It's in the conversation, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of dependent on what type of decks you like to build. If you like building a lot of, like low cost, like say Drown God, or Night's Watch, you probably don't need Close Call. If you're like me and you like building Baratheon big guys or Tyrell lords and ladies.
It's one of those plots. It's not a one use fits all plot. Some decks are going to need to keep uniques out of their out of their dead pile. Some decks are going to need to have extra ways of drawing cards or of seeding Flea Bottom. Other decks just aren't going to care. They're going to look for other options.
Yeah.
Cool. So my number 9, and this probably would have been higher not too long ago, but has. I think maybe dropped off a little bit. Maybe not. I might be underselling this. Varys' Riddle.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Just fantastic. You don't tend to see it in non-range decks as much anymore. Because when it's a non-range deck, it's a very high skill card. You need to really know what your opponent's probably going to do next. Because,
just get lucky.
Or get lucky,
yes.
Get lucky. I did win the Store Champ last year because I had complete board presence and I Varys' riddled Ryan's Valor, which ended up being the right choice in hindsight. But at the time, I was like, oh no. But out of range, this is just such a good plot. Being able to obviously copy whatever your opponent's done, counting coppers being the prime target, but there's lots of other good ones. I have copied a Valor in mid challenge before.
Yeah. Copying Summer Harvest, of course, is a classic.
Yes.
Is a
Oh,
classic.
yes.
Yeah.
But because of Reigns, though, Summer Harvest did become a bit more popular because you didn't have to worry about it turn one.
Yeah, this is true. You could take advantage of the fact that if your opponent was running Reigns, it was actually safe.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's just great. That ability to copy, let's say, out of range to kind of cheat. But I think also when the new Martell box comes out and you've got the one where you just choose a new plot.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I've got a horrible feeling everyone's going to be running one copy of Varys' Riddle in that. Call me crazy.
Yeah. The only problem with that is that if you resolve the at Prince Doran's behest first, they can choose which plot you're copying.
Wait.
And if you
that's right.
choose to resolve your one first, then you have to turn into something, and then they still get to turn into something that counters it.
Oh, so if you both do it, you mean?
Like if you flip Riddle and they flip Doran's behest, the person with Doran's behest is in control of that situation.
No, I meant using Doran's behest to then flip Riddle.
Oh, flip into Riddle.
Yeah.
And that is. All Martell deck will run Riddle, certainly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you meant it was good as a counter to it.
Oh no. Oh well, it's higher initiative, I guess. You can make them flip it. But I guess
everything's higher initiative.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. And I guess if you have 10 plot slots, thanks to Wars to Come, you could totally pull this off without any, without it taking up too much space.
I have a horrible feeling Wars to Come is going to come the new default agenda. I'm not sure what to take. Yeah. Just use Wars to Come.
Yeah, that's good. That agenda could be an episode in itself.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm
mark that down for later.
That's probably an argument for another day.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I think it's just a very good plot. It still sees a lot of play, and the ability just to copy it when revealed. Counting coppers. On the subject to your last one, I've used it to copy a close call before to draw a card and get a character at the dead pile. It's just that toolbox card of awesomeness.
Yeah. I did the exact same thing yesterday. In fact, in the Store Championship, I was running Varys' Riddle in my plot deck then. I will say, on the subject of talking about occasionally it being bad flips, I did have an example, like a prime example of it backfiring in round 2 against Evan, where I'd had the better of the first round of play. Going into plot phase 2, we both were quite low on cards in hand, but I had 2 characters and he had 0. And I thought, well, he's a Targ deck. He's probably going to need to count in coppers to refill his hand for all his tricks. So I play Riddle. Evan plays Marched.
Yeah.
I have no board. Evan comes back and wins.
Yeah.
That reminds me. On Saturday at Manchester, somebody flipped Riddle against me, and I'd flipped Fallen from Favor. Oh yes.
That one is more niche.
Yeah. There are points. Yeah, that's why I say it's not to say that you got unlucky, but it is a high skill card because, and sometimes your opponent if your opponent does something you're not expecting.
It can backfire.
It can backfire.
Yeah.
I had one of the worst times I've ever used Riddle. I was on a games night. I was down my local shop where, as I've said before, they're nice guys. They don't play competitively, and their plot decks were crazy that day. I had no read. I'm like, well, yeah, like you said, I think he's clearly going to count in coppers, and I can't remember what it flipped into, but it was like, oh, that's not good.
Someone to call?
No, because that's the best plot in the game, and copying that would be amazing. You can't, can you actually?
So I think with Riddle is like the stats alone make it fine. Like even if it copies something without a when revealed, like the stats alone, are good enough.
Yeah,
and
5 gold, 6 initiative, 7 reserve. That alone is amazing.
Yeah, when Summer Harvest was everywhere, I opened Riddle a lot because the most common openers were Summer Harvest, in which case ha 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 ha. Counting coppers, in which case ha 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 ha. And Time of Plenty, in which case I've got 1 fewer gold, but I've got to determine initiative, and I've still got high reserve, so I'm fine with that.
Same as the other one was being Carmen for Westeros as well, was still common-ish when this first came out, and you were like, okay, I win initiative, fine.
Yeah, there are so many situations where even if it doesn't hit as such, it just is fine.
Yeah.
Filthy accusations. Like we were saying with King in the North before, it's like even if the plot isn't doing what you want it to do, its baseline is still good enough that you don't mind that.
Yeah.
And sometimes you copy Valor Morghulis against Greyjoy, and then you go, ha 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 ha.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those tells stories plots in that there are some plots like it's very rare when you're excitedly telling someone the story of a game, you're like, and then I flip close call.
Oh.
But
Yeah.
Varys' Ridley is one of those types of plots.
Yeah.
And then I calling the Bannered and got all the money I needed. Yeah.
Riddling trade routes is another fun one. Like, it's not as good as some of the others because it's like once you've like both got the bajillion gold, you having 3 more than them isn't that important. But it is still a fun one to hit.
In fact, I know people who tried to, at one point when trading was really common, would try and riddle into it to make them put more characters out so they could valor the board. And they'd have no hand, was it Varys the board? So they'd lose all their hand, making them play cards. But yeah. Anyway, number 8.
Yep. So my number 8 is one that we've already mentioned, and it is the King in the North.
Ah, awesome! Not just me.
For all the reasons we said before, basically.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a quick round.
Yeah.
Have we just lost Matt? Yeah, we have lost Matt. So
he's not important. Let's keep going. No.
I will try and cover and hope his internet solves itself out. So I'll do my number 8, and then if that doesn't work, we'll have to see what we can do.
Yeah.
My number 8, funny enough, we just sort of talked about it, is March to the Wall.
Nice.
This actually almost didn't make the list, I'm going to be honest. And then I had an epiphany while I was on the toilet.
Best place for them.
Yes. But it should go in for the simple fact that this card affects setup more than any other card in the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a bad setup, or you even go like, I've got duped Bob. I haven't got a Chud though. Do I risk it? Do I risk it? Do I risk putting Bob out and him getting marched? Because if you see a duped Bob, you're marching turn 1 if you've got it.
Are you back, Matt?
Yeah. I'm using 4G to get back in.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So my number 8 was the King in the North, and now Ben's talking about his number 8, which is Marched, and you can do your number 8 after.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, as I was saying, it just affects setup more than anything else. You don't want to risk a high cost card by himself or herself because if your opponent's got marched and it makes sense, they're just going to march. Pretty much. You've seen Tyrion, Tywin. I'm marching. Unless you have that Chud next to him, he's gone. Just get him out. I don't have to. You're going to see another copy maybe later on, but the tempo hit from that is just massive. And on high aggro decks, a lot of stuff I do. A lot of stuff like Reigns, where you got ambush, you can wildfire, put your ambush guy out, and then march next turn, and they're losing some good characters. And now with Flea Bottom getting stuff with on arrival abilities marched, it just makes sense.
Yeah. Marched has been a something you had to respect ever since the core set, and it continues to be something you have to, both plan for dealing with and plan for using. It works in aggro strategies, it works in attrition strategies. It's a very solid plot. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone have anything else on that, or do we want to go on to Matt's number 8?
Ben?
I think that sounds like we're on your number 8, Matt.
Oh wait, no, but let's at least hear from Ben. Is he there?
Sorry, I do apologise. I just had to let my son free.
Okay, so it sounds like you'll have some editing to do, Mr. Ben.
Oh yes, this is going to be fun.
Okay, it's all confined to a small section though.
Exactly.
Okay. So, on to my number 8, which is something, it's probably my least favorite plot in the game, but it's something that, really deserves to be on the list considering about how impactful it can be to the game, and that is Heads on Spikes. It's it's not my favorite, so, but it discards a card out of your opponent's hand, it potentially gives you 2 power, and then it'll often, kill the character they were planning to play on that turn anyway. It's mean, it's nasty, but it's really good.
It's a high skill card. It's a high skill card.
Not really. No,
it's not. No.
Close call and Heads on Spikes. You really are just trying to turn off the Brotherhood as much as you can, aren't you, Matt?
Yeah, well...
Find a way of sneaking Isle of Ravens into this list.
Oh, Oh, I think I have a way to do that.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
got it. Okay.
No, I mean, we saw the power of this during the World Championships when I think Euros with oh my god, Reinhardt. He had two of these in his deck,
Yeah.
and if it wasn't his opener, it was his second and third plot.
Yeah.
And it's just a good card. When you got like Queen Cersei out,
That's icing right there.
yeah, she gains the power. Obviously, and there's been decks made based around this with Tyrion's Chain and Queen Cersei.
hmm
So yeah, and it's also one of my favourites. Reigns Varys' Riddle triggers.
Yes.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're going to try and head spike my character, are you? Right.
All right. Right back at you, buddy.
Especially if you can against Martell player, you can force them to Ariane back to their hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, then it's like, come on.
Mhm.
My favourite use of this is actually in Greyjoy Winter, where
Okay.
you open Wraiths in their midst.
Yeah,
They have to discard down to 3 cards. Odds are they're probably keeping the characters they intend to play next round.
yeah.
And then you get spikes, and your odds of hitting, not only getting 2 power, but hitting something pretty damn important is pretty high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done that before because you basically the general consensus is probably like maybe they've got an econ card, they'll probably keep that just to help keep the tempo against winter, and then 2 characters, and it's a good one.
I've also heard rumblings of using Heads on Spikes in Baratheon because you can use Queen's Men and Seed in Flames to prepare the hand.
Yeah, yeah. Always be wary if a Baratheon player looks at your hand on turn 1 and goes, okay, I'm gonna get rid of this event, leaving you with 4 characters in your hand. That's probably gonna go badly next turn.
Yeah. It also, it has increased in value, I think, since Flea Bottom came out, in that it's a discard from hand that you can guarantee isn't seeding Flea Bottom.
Back. That's
Either
true.
you're discarding a location or you're putting a character in the dead pile.
No, definitely. No, it's good. It's a very good card.
Yeah, I mean, it has its pros, it has its cons. It's probably the most discussed plot. Like, even over stuff like Valor, I think nothing has had the airtime that Heads on Spikes has had.
I think that's fair.
Actually, I've thought of another one, but it might be on my list, so I'm going to shut up about it.
Okay.
But yeah, I think another aspect we should probably give airtime to with Heads on Spikes is its value in melee. Like, it's one of the reasons why melee had to have a restricted list.
Yep, I can see that. I don't know if I forgot to say on Varys' Riddle, that's also pretty good in melee.
Yeah, and we've lost Matt.
I figured. And the one thing I've learned from melee is I now pack Varys' Riddle instead of Valor. Because I want to be the person who copies the Valor, not the person that actually Valors.
Yeah, I think the only problem with that is if you get a table where everyone does it.
Yes, that is the issue. And everyone's like, right, who's got Valor? We need some Valor. This guy's winning.
Yeah, I think. I think not to be too much of a amateur designer, but I think Heads on Spikes, it's powerful enough without the extra power gain, but the fact that it can be used by a rush deck to push itself over is a little much.
I honestly think it should be gain 1 power, not 2. I think that's what makes it a bit too good. But hey ho. Right, number 7.
Yeah.
Whammer.
So this is one that we've already mentioned.
Yeah.
Again, apparently I'm just going to be doing a best of your lists for the rest of this.
Oh, excellent.
My number 7 is Varys' Riddle.
Varys' Riddle.
Very good. Yeah.
For everything we've already said about it, so we can basically just move right along because I wasn't saving any thoughts on this one for later.
But do you have a Varys' Riddle story you can contribute?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. How about another one? Do you have another one?
In round 1 of that tournament, I managed to Varys' Riddle Close Call.
No.
Which actually, now that I think about it, I was taking the piss there. That proved very useful because, first of all, I was able to use it. The third card I drew that round was Night Gathers.
Uh-huh.
And Varys' Riddle has higher reserve than Night Gathers, than Close Call, so I could play Night Gathers, and I wouldn't have drawn it if I hadn't played it. And one of the cards that I marshalled through Night Gathers was the Viserion that my opponent had moved over with Close Call.
Nice.
Well done.
Yeah,
I have a story too.
Story.
I I have a general story too. At Stalek, apparently I was playing Tyrell Reigns of Castamere, and my opponents kept expecting me to play like Count and Coppers or Valor Doharis, but Valor Morgulis, and then they kept copying my Wardens of the South.
Yeah,
they weren't ready for that one.
Okay.
One other thing I will say on the riddle is that I think even more so than Filthy Accusations and the Power Behind the Throne, it is the first scheme that I put in a Reigns deck.
Yeah, definitely.
And like in Tyrell, the first Reigns decks I was building out of Tyrell, I actually didn't have Riddle. I thought pulling the strings was just sort of like Riddle, but a bit better in that you didn't have to land it on the correct turn. But then I realised that Riddle is so good that my later Tyrell Reigns decks ran both Riddle and pulling the strings.
I must say, yeah, just run both. They're both good.
Yeah. Like basically, there's no upper limit on how many times it's a good idea to copy Counting Coppers.
Yeah, basically. and play it yourself.
Yes.
Okay, I guess we'll go with the new order, as Matt dropped off. So my number 7 is Blood of the Dragon.
Ooh.
Which I've just been having a lot of, I would say fun, but generally I think a fun card, both people have to be having fun. And my opponent
that's not true at all. Builders is fun.
But with the rise of Burn, especially with this cycle, this plot has just become amazing. I mean, this plot turns Stormcrows from being, they're alright, to I can wipe out all your chuds in one action.
Or wipe out the big guys, especially when you start factoring in Astapor.
Well, no, because that's been a challenge for Astapor. With Stormcrows, they don't have to be in a challenge.
Oh, yeah, with Stormcrows. I'm just thinking in general, it's like Blood of the Dragon is the danger zone.
Yeah, Blood of the Dragon is for Targ what Wardens of the South is for Tyrell. It's probably the round in which you're winning all your challenges.
Yep, because your opponent probably isn't going to... Especially if you've got Astapor out, they can't do anything for a turn. The amount of chuds this gets rid of... the best one, the classic one before Stormcrows come out is against Night's Watch. Oh, you got the wall. Fine, no, everyone's live. I'm going to Nightmares the wall.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And likewise with Winterfell and Stark as well.
Yeah. This plot does a lot of work, and it helps field the econ because you need 4 dead characters, and most people run well, not say most people run. There's a lot of 1 strength characters which are incredibly useful. You take obviously all reducers are 1 strength. The Lordsport Shipwrights, which can be very annoying for Targ, 1 strength. Bran, 1 strength. Yeah. Although obviously if Lewin's out, he's immune to it. But as you say, it's just a good card, really.
Yeah, I think you get the niche advantages of like being able to kill your own Viserys Targaryen to clear off an annoying attachment.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe throw in a funeral pyre there to turn Blood of the Dragon into Counting Coppers.
The only issue with this plot, and I think this is something we got the audience would have heard. We talked about with the what makes a character can be good. It's not very good in the mirror match, but that probably shows how good the card actually just is.
Yeah.
So
if you haven't seen your Astapor or whatever, then it can suffer in terms of like if you aren't able to properly leverage the effect. Because I think with Blood of the Dragon, sure, the stuff you can do with Dragon is No Slave and Stormcrows and stuff, but a lot of the time the real strength for it is in the threat of activation, in that it paralyzes your opponent for the round.
Yes.
If they don't feel paralyzed, then it sure can suck to only have 2 gold that round.
No, I do agree. Right. But sometimes I've got 2 dragons out. I've just sat there on the 2 gold.
Yeah. Also, if the newly spoiled Dany is going to be an important factor, then the fact that they now have another way of being able to easily pick off chuds with terminal burn outside of challenges is also going to maybe reduce the effect of blood. I mean, I think it's a why not run both situation more likely, but I do think its importance to Targ might be slightly diminished, weirdly, despite burn getting even better.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I mean, since she's not out yet, include away.
Yeah, I agree. Blood of the Dragon really propels, especially Targaryen fealty. to like one of the strongest decks that you really have to you really have to consider. This is the Danger Zone plot from Targaryen.
Matt, I hate to say it, no, it's Targaryen Reigns. That's the Targ deck.
Oh, right. Sorry. Well, I was thinking fealty because that one extra fealty gold is actually really important when you only get two others. Yeah.
You're both wrong. The correct Targ deck is obviously Red Door Skahazadan.
Yes.
You know what? We'll settle this in the comments. Hey, Reinhardt, could you, Reinhardt? We're paging Reinhardt. Let's let Reinhardt tell us which one is the best.
Well, out of the three we mentioned that aren't the one he won Euros and Worlds.
Yeah.
Exactly. Matt, you're number 7.
My number 7 is a very generally useful plot, especially as an opener for, and the theme here, you guys are probably going to notice, is that I like playing constructive decks, and that is, it's Time of Plenty. 6 gold, extra cards to help you get set up, good reserve, it's solid. Yes, you give your opponent a card. Yes, that can be an issue, but you know what? If you're building a deck and you're going to, want to put things on the board, Time of Plenty is a good way to get yourself started.
Yeah.
The thing is, as well, with the you give your opponent a card thing, people bring that up all the time, and it drives me insane because if you're opening with it, then you're probably, like, that's the round you're most likely to discard down to reserve, so you can even turn it into card advantage. But also, yes, your opponent's gaining one extra card, but you're also gaining one extra card. Like, it's, as far as a card advantage standpoint goes, it's not like a Gift of Arboret or whatever, where you're giving your opponent a benefit. It's card advantage neutral. So that downside, unless your opponent is running a very specific deck that's like either got no card draw in it or is very discard heavy and is going to churn through every single card it gets one way or the other, the tempo of giving them one extra card is basically non-existent. And at that point, it's just a 6 gold opener with no downside. You don't care if your opponent riddles it. You don't care if your opponent nables it. In fact, you're happy if your opponent nables it.
Yeah.
Like, the worst case scenario is your opponent plays Summer Harvest.
I was about to say that, yeah.
I was going to say trading with the Patoshi for...
No. Patoshi's a great one against it because then they've only got 5 gold and you... 5 reserve.
True, that's true.
Yeah.
And you've got 9 gold to be able to play out whatever you need to. They've only got 1 more gold than you in that.
And generally, if they're trading turn 1, they probably have a big character to put out.
Exactly.
This is also true.
At which point, they probably haven't got enough gold to leverage the other card you've just given them.
Yeah, after the draw step, they're then 5 cards over reserve and probably aren't just playing out a bunch of things. They're probably playing out 1 or 2 big things.
Yeah, that's true. Also, if you flip Time of Plenty and your opponent does trading with Toshi, you can immediately reach across the table and give your opponent a hug because you have mutually helped each other.
Yeah, just giving each other gifts.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, that's the other one. If your opponent plays trading, giving you 3 extra gold for your extra card, and you've got the reserve 7, you don't have to use it. That gold. That seems a better deal for me for them to trading into this because also they've basically turned this into a 9 gold plot with 7 reserve, where they've got a 10 gold plot with 5 reserve.
5 reserve. Yeah.
That seems. I'd rather be on the Time of Plenty side on that one.
Yeah, that's true. I guess worst case scenario really is Summer Harvest.
There's one massive downside I find to Time of Plenty, and that's I've only got 2 altarts, so only having 5 of them is really annoying for like when I want to have about 8 for my decks.
Yeah, that's true.
Basically, what you're saying is you need to ask Rebecca for a few more of the Time of Plenty altarts you made.
Well, the downside is I can't get Dan to sign them anymore. Because without posting to Canada, that's a lot of effort.
You know what we're gonna have to do here, fellas? We're gonna have to resolve this. I see we have a problem of the supply of alt arts not fulfilling the demand out there for alt arts. So we need to step in as enterprising Southern Bannermen and create a Southern Bannermen official alt art marketplace.
Is this where we do the one with the winter, Christmas Mel?
Oh, Christmas Bell is definitely a part of this. Yeah, because she's going to be on a plot. She's going to be on a playmat. She's going to be on,
She's going to be on mugs. She's going to be on T-shirts. We're going to corner the market.
I mean, James.
Yeah.
You would definitely wear a Christmas Melisandre shirt. I mean, considering what you were wearing this weekend, like with your Puddle of Cats shirt and your Santa Claus suit at Stalag, you would wear Christmas Melisandre. I know it.
Well,
Yeah.
As much of a fashion pioneer as I like to think I am, my tastes might not represent the general marketplaces, but we'll see.
Right.
But yeah, another point I want to say, just getting back to Time of Plenty briefly, is it's interesting to me how much more play Time of Plenty sees than Early Frost.
Yes.
They both effectively accomplish the same thing of fiddling around with the draw and being card advantage neutral. But it suggests to me that probably giving your opponent a card isn't that much of a downside, given that the exact same plot but in reverse sees very little play.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the phrase is draw as king.
Yeah.
So, and I was going the basic, because I will be honest, at one point I did fall in the camp of, do I really want to give my opponent an extra card? I'm just going on the basis of my cards are better than your cards, because otherwise I'm probably in trouble anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But,
one thing as well is that one thing that is a strike against it rather as well is that it is one of those plots where you really do kind of need to open with it or play it round 2 if you've got it, simply because yes, you can use it for cards later game, but there's nothing worse than when your opponent is down to 1 or 2 cards in hand, and that is when giving them a card really can bite.
Yes,
well,
I do agree. That is being an
I
issue.
will present an exception to that. Something I've done in the past with Time of Plenty is what I have done is I've waited until my opponent, especially against Greyjoy, when they've got like a handful of cards and I know they're going to go Valor Morghulis. Often I'll fire off the Time of Plenty then because it helps me recover,
That's
and
fair.
I'm pretty sure they're going to be above reserve, with not a lot of gold to play their stuff.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah, I've also used it against when I suspect my opponent is going to play March to the Wall, because their reserve is going to be low and their income is going to be less than mine.
Yeah. Oh, another good one is against Retaliation.
Yeah, because it can help you
not
prepare for the retaliation.
But not so much in Martell player, because they've also probably got Flea Bottom and... Cool. Number 6.
Okay.
Yeah. So continuing what has been happening for the last couple, my number 6 is Time of Plenty.
Whoa, James! It's like you think I'm right.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far, mate.
Oh, okay.
Putting back the curtains, I would say, putting back the curtains, you are the person, Matt, who said that including Ariana's number 10 was controversial.
Yeah, I seem to underrate cards. And
Right. My number 7, and this is definitely one
Number
we're talking
6.
about. Number 6, sorry, is For the Watch.
Ooh.
So, this...
Hello.
Obviously, not an every deck card, because it's a Night's Watch, and so you can't have it, you're not playing Night's Watch. But even a Night's Watch, it's not an every deck card. But if you're running a defensive deck, and later in the game, it's ridiculously hard to win challenges.
Yeah.
And get the unopposed, whatever, to nail the wall. When you basically tell your opponent that you can't win the first challenge you do, I can, though, and I can get all my triggers off winning that.
Yeah. I.e. Shadow Tower.
Shadow Tower, renowned potentially. Like if you've got some guys who are defensive renowned, Jon Snow can go in there and do stuff. You can potentially flip it, especially I've done it before against Crossing. I flipped out this into range as a defensive range trigger to flip into Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The classic one, of course, from back in the day, like around the time when this first came out, was using it with the Sword in the Darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one, I think Sword of the Darkness is worth a one copy in like every Night's Watch deck that uses this, just so you can like make your opponent guess, like, does he have Sword of the Darkness to like totally screw me?
It's fun as a show me plot, not plot. Event.
The other one, another show me one, is okay. You do your intrigue, cool. I'm not going to bother defending it, blah blah blah. You do your military, watchers on the wall.
Oh,
so you're basically you've just done 2 challenges. You've lost a load of characters and achieved nothing.
Yeah. It's a very strong plot. It's basically got 2 phases where it's strong. The first is when the boards are small, and you're saying you're trying to force me to kneel stuff out to get an unopposed, but now with only 3 characters on your side, one of those characters is going to be kneeling for nothing if you want to be able to do any challenges, and it can help you get that wall trigger off. And then the second is, as you say later on, being able to make it so that you can defend successfully all 3 challenges.
Yeah. No, it's really strong, and it was a toss up. I did almost have the Fire That Burns in this, but I feel the Fire That Burns is only really that strong out of range.
Yeah, well, the Fire That Burns has good stats to really back it up.
Yeah, but the zero claim, you need
the
to
zero
flip out
claim.
of it.
I was going to say.
Yeah, that's the issue. If you can't flip out of it, unless you've got a bucket load of renowned,
Yeah.
Or you're going down the dominance route. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd say why not both if you're doing a defensive nice watch.
My range deck definitely runs both.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my position on for the watch being better. Definitely, is there are some decks where you run for the watch but not the fire that burns.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's a deck where you run the fire that burns but not for the watch.
Okay.
Yeah, and probably not. Especially, I mean, the other downside is only limit one per deck. Because if you had two, oh god.
Yeah. Also, one other thing very important that we need to talk about with for the watch that's a pro in it, it's got an exclamation mark in its name.
Yes.
It's not, the King in the North doesn't have an exclamation mark against its name, and you can only say that plot by saying the King in the North.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's a flavor, errata that needs to be made there.
Completely agree.
I was very disappointed. Back in first edition, Retaliation had
an exclamation point. That's right,
and it doesn't in second edition.
Cool, Matt, number 6.
My number 6 is one that the two of you are probably going to think they should have rated higher. It is, it's such a momentous plot. It's such a defining plot for many decks. It has to be respected. Fortunately, it's only in a chapter pack, so we might see it go away someday. And that's Valar Morghulis.
Ooh.
Yes. Only number 6. I think I expect you to criticize me on Valar Morghulis only being number 6. It's the reset plot. It's the way you can carve yourself, back into the game. Being, when you have your board wiped. It's how you can utilize duplicates and saves to totally wipe your opponent and then completely roll them. It's such a mainstay. It's super important, and it's definitely a very strong plot. Even though the stats are crap, the effect is very game changing.
Yeah. I mean, you've done all the talking for me for when it's higher on my list. I can say that.
Yeah, same here.
I mean, this is a weird thing to say, given that you've ranked it as high as being the 6th best plot in the game. But why so down on it, Matt?
You'll see based on some of my other plots that I have higher.
Okay, so basically, you're of the opinion that some of the core functionality it produces it's been surpassed in other departments.
I would say so, based on more recent experiences.
That's fair. Okay, do we want to debate the lowliness of Valor on your list then when we come to it being higher on our list and when we come to other plots on your list, and sort of save the bulk of the discussion?
I say that the rest of my plots you're going to say, why was this not Valar Morghulis? That's what you're going to you have to ask.
Yeah, I think we save the discussion for when we've seen the other plots, because without the full picture, it's hard to say why Matt thinks this is so low.
So low, number 6. Oh, it's an honor. Yeah. I mean, I put it above Time of Plenty. I put it above Close Call, which is one of my favorite plots in the game.
Why do you think Valor's shit, Matt?
I put it above Nothing Burns Like the Cold, which is, at least at the moment, my second favorite plot in the game.
This is fair.
Right.
Yes.
Number 5, Monsieur Wamar.
And I'm very happy because it's one that neither of you have mentioned yet. So I feel like a unique special flower. That is the best late game economy plot that there is. It is Trade Routes.
Yeah.
Why so low, James?
Well, I'm actually going to say, why so high? This is in my honourable mentions.
Ooh.
Basically, if Matt was to claim this as one of his reasons for having Valor so low, I would accept that. It's such a good counter.
Yeah.
Basically, if your deck is the type of deck that needs to be able to have those bursts of big economy to be able to play out as big characters, I've found that the deck will usually be open Time of Plenty, maybe have another economy plot if you need it, like, Noble or Trading or whatever, but then definitely around plot 4 or 6 is when plot 4, 5, 6 is going to be Trade Routes. I'm going to be trying to hit it on my opponent's reset, be that Valor Daenerys, be that Valar Morghulis, be that First Snow, whatever, and I'm going to use that refurb at that time they don't want me to be able to. And by that point in the game, consistently, Trade Routes is getting you, like a double-digit number of gold.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Thanks.
It's very good. It's a really good plot. I don't know if this is spoilers. I have no economy plots in my top 10, which is why
Oh,
this
that's
didn't
good.
make the list. Because
Oh, it's because you're boring.
no, it's because I feel economy plots are important, but they're not, in my opinion, they're not the most impact. We're talking about plots being impactful, and well, you said this, yes, it gives you lots of money. That's quite impactful. Get characters out, but I'm looking. I like, for me, I rate stuff which has immediate effects without you then having to play cards afterwards. That kind of makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's a fair enough comment. I mean, my list, it has some impactful plots on it certainly, but my primary goal with all these things is always efficiency. And
This
out
is,
of oh, sorry, you go.
I was going to say this is my highest ranked economy plot.
Yes,
It's the only
same.
one I have on my honourable mentions as well.
Okay.
There's no noble cause, there's no trading, there's no other econ, summer harvest or any other econ plot you could think of. It's not on there. This is the only one that's on there because I do agree. I think it's the best econ plot in the game right now.
Yeah, same. I mean, like, it says something that there are so many different options if you want early game economy. There is, Time of Plenty, there's Noble Course, there's Summer Harvest, there's Trading with a Pentoshi, there's Late Summer Feast if you're weird. There's all these plots that could be in contention for that slot of, your turn 1 or turn 2 burst economy plot. Trade routes is the only option I ever see for that late game econ.
Yeah. Trade routes is the reason why I had to start carrying more than 10 gold, 10 gold coins with me.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
I think in my game against Bamford, at Stockton on Sunday, I think we had so many locations on the board around turn 5 or 6 or so that we both flipped trade routes, and we collected. I think it was 14. We collected 14 gold off the Ren revealed alone.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I ran builders at Starlek, and you'll be shocked to hear trade routes was in my plot deck.
And this is the card. I wouldn't say put builders back into the meta because they always were, but you always said you always talked about yourself. First, no into like famine builders. This is the plot that went. Actually, no, that doesn't hurt me anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's the key thing about it, is that it made it so that if the opponent did an early game choke, it didn't end your game. In a way that even having, Time of Plenty or whatever, getting the 6 gold level just wasn't good enough to fix it, but trade routes can fix it. Get you back into games where you've lost the board.
Yes. In fact, I remember when I first saw this plot, I realized, this isn't an early game plot, but it is. I call it the Valor Recovery plot. Yeah. Because after you've been hit by your opponent's reset, this is what you want to, lay out a bunch of gold, and lay out a bunch of characters to get yourself really back into the game. It's also particularly good after counting coppers when you've loaded up, with a high, with high reserve, and then you just dump your hand to really kind of push towards victory. One thing about trade routes though is that this may fall down later on, because I sense that we're kind of in a meta right now where locations, particularly non-limited locations, are really good. But if the game shifts such that we get some mass clear plots for non-limited locations,
we've got
change.
Political disaster.
We've got that. It's called political disaster.
No, I don't.
Political disaster is an excellent counter to trade routes because not only does it neuter trade routes, but it also has higher reserve, higher initiative,
initiative free,
so that you can choose the disaster.
All of this is true, but the thing about political disaster is that if your opponent plays a duplicate of their wall, political disaster is not gonna end it. Yeah. I'm thinking later we might. I mean, we just got seized by the guard and a King of the North.
Seized by the guard's really bad.
Well, we'll have another episode about that, but. But we just got some in this latest pack. We just got some countermeasures for non-limited locations like Flea Bottom, where it was relatively easy to leverage Flea Bottom, and it's a relatively safe thing to do. I mean, how many nightmares does your opponent have? I mean, right now Stark is Wolf is a great banner because it's got Frozen Solid, to deal with unlimited locations and lots of them. So I think later on trade routes might come down a bit if non-limited locations fall out of favor.
That's very fair. Yeah. And at that point, since you basically said its name, then the natural replacement will be fallen from favor as the anti-valor plot.
Yeah, that's a good anti-valor. That's a very good anti-valor plot.
Yeah.
Cool. We've already touched. So, anything else to add?
I think we covered it pretty thoroughly, and I think we'll probably be able to touch on it again when Matt inevitably has it as number one.
My number 5, we've already talked about it, so this will be quick, is Heads on Spikes.
Yeah.
It's really touched on it. It's really good. Worst case scenario, your opponent's got one less card. Best case scenario, you've killed their best character.
And win the game.
Yeah. We're ready to touch on that. Matt, your number 5?
Oh, yeah. My number 5 is something that also has already been mentioned, and that's March to the Wall.
Oh.
Yeah, it's since the core, it's been something you've had to respect every setup phase, every phase of the game. You have to respect March to the Wall. March to the Wall,
even in standing phase, you have to expect March to the Wall.
Yeah, even in steady phase, you have to expect March to the Wall. March to the Wall, it really dictates your play. It's an important skill to learn about when you're new to the game. You have to learn how to prevent situations where you're going to get hit by marched. And I actually do like how it encourages it encourages getting better at the game, because it encourages players to observe their opponent's side of the board, and observe and do challenges and defend challenges and make claim choices such that they don't get blasted by March to the Wall.
It's one of those very important learning cards where ideally once and only once you will claim a chud so that your duped Tywin or whatever will be able to stick around through whatever the opponent throws at them, and then he gets marched. And then next time you'll know to take that Tywin dupe. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So March to the Wall, it's a very game defining card. Very game defining plot. It affects how you build your decks, because thanks to March to the Wall, you kind of have to provide. You can't just run with your key characters. You have to actually have chuds for them to back them up. Thanks to March to the Wall, it's a mainstay in all sorts of decks. It's a mainstay in aggro decks. It's a mainstay in attrition decks, and it definitely deserves a place in the top 10.
Yeah. Whammer, number 4.
So now it's my turn, presumably, to be blasted for having Valar Morghulis so low, because Valar Morghulis is my number 4 best plot in the game. I mean, Matt covered everything it does well. Like the fact that it is the only thing that has mass kill on that scale. Like Valar Dohaeris can remove, but your opponent gets to keep essentially whatever one thing they want to keep. Mm-hmm. Varys can be cancelled or nightmares, and you can just kill him off, and he only discards, so if your opponent has extra copies, they can play another. Wildfire, you get to keep 3. Marched, they have to be whittled down to 1 before it does anything. If you want that mass clear, Valar Morghulis is still the only thing that allows you to do it. You can use it as a comeback tool now that we've got the econ to support the low stats. You can use it as an aggressive card to wipe out your opponent's board. You can leverage it using your Iron Minds, your Bodyguard, your dupes, your save effects on cards like Maester Aemon and so on. Mm-hmm. With Reigns of Castamere, you can turn out of it, which is always a wonderful feeling.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The game changed so much when Valor came out. Like the first year or so of the game and everything since then, almost in a weird way, feel like 2 separate games.
Yeah, definitely.
Like there have been plenty of plots that have come out that have had a serious impact on how the game is played. Valar Morghulis is the most impactful, the most meta-defining plot that we have had to date. And the only reasons it's not higher on my list are because I think the plots above it are even better. It's like the Valor has its downsides. We've gone over them. The fact that because it's so important, so many people build around trying to counter it. You have, Riddle to get rid of your dupes. You have Ghosts of Harrenhal to counter it. You have Craster as the bring everything back type cards. You have just, I'm going to play trade routes or for them from favor and reflood better than you and reapply the pressure. But still, nothing does what Valor does.
Now, there's one thing I forgot to mention. When Valor was kind of about to come out, and I was a bit worried about it because I hadn't played first edition, and I knew it was going to be quite a big learning curve, and I was worried about the 2 gold. Ryan said something to me which always stuck. He said, well, it's not really a 2 gold plot, is it? And, well, what do you mean? He went, well, effectively, you've put to the sword every character on your opponent's side. So they've got 5 characters. That's 10 gold you've just saved.
Oh, I see.
I
see.
was like, yeah. I kind of, it's not. I know it doesn't exactly work like that, but the logic I can understand. How much would you pay to kill every single character? How much gold is worth killing every character on your opponent's side of the board? Yes, all yours die as well, but I say, if you can mitigate that, if you can make the advantage out of that, that's not really that big an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even then, with the put to the sword example, obviously that requires you to be in a position to win military by 5.
Yes.
Like Targaryen pay 4 gold for Crown of Gold.
Yeah.
And people often say that's one of the most overpowered, stupid cards in the game.
Yeah, high skill card.
Well, granted, Crown of Gold cuts through duplicates, so it's got that going for it.
This is true.
Yeah.
But yeah, points all there. But cool. Yeah. Okay, so my number 4.
Mm-hmm.
Is it my turn to get blasted? Because Valar is also my number 4.
None of us have it in top 3. Official credibility lost.
Interesting.
It almost was, and I had a last minute tweak around. And yeah, it was almost 3rd, and then I've dropped it down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Matt, you're number 4.
So my number 4 actually is going to highlight the difference between me and the two of you. It's going to highlight how I believe I am a constructive player who likes putting characters on the board and making lots of challenges.
It's going to be Late Summer Feast, because it's Late Summer Feast I have to quit in protest.
Well, yes.
It is.
Well, actually, it's a set of 3. Because
What?
I think this slot, my number 4 goes to a combination of 3 plots, because it's which one you include is based on what your deck is trying to do. That is a Noble Cause, Late Summer Feast, and Trading with Mintoshi. You don't often run more than one of those 3, but you're probably going to run one of those 3. Late Summer Feast is great in Late Summer Feast is if you're doing either Raids of Castamere, or you're doing kind of defensive deck that doesn't really care how much your opponent draws, or if you don't care about winning a lot of challenges.
You can always just not do challenges on the first turn if you play it.
Yeah.
Or if you care about winning a lot of games, it's good.
Trading with Mintoshi is when you don't really, care about the, your opponent like matching you on tempo and putting out a little bit of extra characters. And Noble Cause is kind of the basic. I get 7 gold. I'm going to play a big character. I'm going to play an important character. So my number 4 goes to the economy plot, the early game economy plot.
You haven't got trade routes on there, Matt.
That is not an early game economy plot, as we discussed.
He's still got 3 slots to go.
And I still have 3 slots to go.
I see. Fair enough.
I'm calling them as trade routes, calling the banners, and marching orders.
Marching orders.
But they're all quite constructive plots.
Yeah, and I guess by that my own metric of number 4 being the economy plot, then if you're running a deck that leverages it, then marching orders would go in there.
I think you're wrong, but I think one of them goes to Harrenhal. So when your opponent's being destructive and stop you being constructive, you can bring the character back.
Oh, that makes it equivalent to trade routes as your Valor recovery plot. Yeah.
Cool.
But no, my number 4 is the economy plot. Yeah.
And in all fairness, and again, this for the viewers, the unaired episode, Warhammer has set precedence for this by one of his choices, which was all the reducers in the game.
Yeah, I'd say the difference there, in my defense, is that I didn't there's 8 of them. In fact, sorry, there's 9 of them even, and I didn't want my list to be boring by slots 5 through 10 being 6 of those 9 reducers in the order that I thought they were best.
Yeah.
Whereas here, you could have included those.
Yeah. No, but I have 3 plots that largely do the same thing, largely fulfill the same purpose, and you're not likely to run more than one of the 3. Yeah.
I don't know.
I see your logic. By the same token of they're all somewhat interchangeable.
Yeah.
Except Late Summer Feast, which is stuck in the binder forever, obviously. I didn't include any of them. But I do see your logic for including them in that they represent an important part of building a deck. Like if you were to build a plot deck out of cards in your top 10, then it sounds like your plot deck would probably be the most balanced in that you've included those cards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my one was struggle with Econ.
Your plot. So yeah, I guess what we could do at the end of this is we could rate if we built Wars to Come. how would our plots would stand up?
Well, no, because if we built Wars to Come, then I'd be having double on some of these.
Yeah. I just realised I should for my pick 3. I should have picked all the resets if we're doing this.
No, the resets are different. That's two different things.
No, they don't. You got one which is to clear the whole board, one which is to leave 3 characters on the board, and one which is to leave a combination of 10 golds worth of characters on the board, Matt. They're all very different.
They're very different. Very different, Ben. Very different.
And political disaster.
And political disaster, yes. That's if you want to get rid of locations but not characters, see?
Matt, out of interest, if you did have to nominate one of them as your 4th best plot in the game, what would it be?
Noble Cause. Because it has the least downside, and you don't get screwed if your opponent opens with Summer Harvest.
Okay.
I agree. Noble Cause is the one that I have listed on my honourable mentions for the honourable mentions. And I thought about trading, but decided against it. And not on Late Summer Feast.
In that case, Matt, I say you now have to use Noble Cause in every deck, and in your next tournament you must take Night's Watch.
That's fine. You can just run Old Bear Mormont.
And Mance Raider. He's a lord, isn't he?
No, he's the king.
Oh,
he's not a lord.
Okay, maybe not. Okay. But I'd say Noble Cause because it's got the least downsides. You don't get screwed by your opponent playing Late Summer Feast, and it just works.
You also don't get screwed by your opponent running Naval. One of my favourite Noble Cause stories was Keb was playing against Bamford, Stevenage GNK, and this was a while ago. This was like cycle 1 sort of time.
Mm-hmm.
And Keb was Barrowfieldy, opened Noble Cause. Dave opened Naval Superiority, and Keb was still able to get out Bob round 1 with a duplicate and with a second duplicate.
Yes, go Kings Road.
Yeah, Keb had set up a Kings Road and played Dragonstone Port round 1, and it was a reduction of 3 from Kings Road, 1 from the Port, 1 from Fealty, and crucially 2 from Noble Cause.
Yes.
To add up to a reduction of 7 to get Bob out with no gold and then dupe him and trip him.
Yeah.
I still remember. I remember as I had G&K in Brighton, where Calvin did it to Ryan's trading with the Pentoshi. So Ryan even gave him gold, and Ryan put no characters on the board basically for 2 turns and still won the game because Calvin saw no characters. He had all this money, had nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Trading with Batoshi is also pretty funny. Is if you catch your opponent doing Ferris's Riddle against you, because now it's like your 10 gold becomes 13 gold.
Naval owns trading and Late Summer Feast, but Noble Cause, while getting hit by it, gives you some room for manoeuvre.
Especially if you're playing Stark or something, and you've probably got a cheap Lord or Lady you can get out anyway.
Yeah, and also on the subject of them as openers, Noble Cause has the highest reserve of 3 as well.
Yeah, there's no downside there.
Okay. Yeah. So, Whammer, number 3.
My number 3, and there's a very real case for this being number 1. Honestly, the only reason it's not my number 1 and it's as low as number 3 is that, as abusive as it can be, a lot of people sort of have a gentleman's agreement almost not to properly make it horrible, and that is the Annals of Castle Black.
Yeah.
When we were talking about Heads on Spikes being the most discussed, and I said, one of mine later on actually might be the most discussed.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, James. You weren't on the Lost episode in which we declared that we at the Southern Bannermen do not endorse the Annals of Castle Black.
To the point where this plot should be in my top 10. I just completely blank it from my mind. It doesn't exist anymore because I hate this plot so much.
Yeah.
It's like, put a limit on it. Come on.
I have complicated feelings towards the plot in that, in the first place, I think that the intended usage of it, i.e. not as just a dumb combo engine, but as both players get to play with the fun events from their discount pile. Yeah. I think it's a really fun plot in that context.
I agree.
Sure.
In the second place, I think that in decks that leverage it that aren't combo decks, that, maybe Tyrell running, your Brenny's Rides and getting to replay them, or obviously Targ Burn, suddenly having access to all your Drax again, that sort of thing. I think it's a really good and fair card in those decks.
Yeah.
And I also think that the amount that people whine and moan about combo decks is obscene. Like, the decks themselves are not fun if they're being played all the time. No one is going to claim that they are. But people on the internet need to get perspective with this stuff.
Well,
yeah.
Post-traumatic stress disorder takes many forms, James. And playing against a combo deck will traumatize you for life.
But like, when we get like entire metas of people taking Annals decks to Worlds to try to prove that it's busted, and then
that logic is
all doing, having like a slightly worse than average qualification ratio between the lot of them, even though that group included, like a Gen Con winner and lots of very good players.
Well, one thing to note there, James, is that day 2, see, all the Annals players, they blitzed day 1. Day 2, there was evidence that the day 2 players modified their decks, knowing about Annals of Castle Black and combo decks. You could argue that the Annals blitz did what it set out to do, in that it kind of tilted the world's meta towards Rush and Lord of the Crossing.
But I mean, the decks that won were from the Europeans that weren't had already decided their decks before they went.
Yeah. They might have decided their decks,
the same deck that he won the Italian Nationals with. Reinhardt played more or less the same deck that he won Euros.
There was evidence where they'd swap out a plot or two. They'd make a few changes.
A couple of changes, but the thing is, you can't change your deck to play against.
You can't just meta against Annals and then be shit against everything else. You still got to have a coherent deck.
We're going to go on a massive sort of combo here. Be careful, but there are counters coming in now. You've got Trish Bolte.
Trish Botley, yeah.
So he's a brilliant counter to combo because I will move that card from the game. You can't play it anymore. What's it? The new the High Maester?
Mm-hmm.
Not High Maester. High Sparrow.
High Septon. High Sparrow. Yeah.
High Sparrow. You cut down their draw. They can't draw through the deck quick enough to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, and people have started to cotton on that they can use, like barring the gates or supporting the faith or cards like that to really badly hit combo as well.
Why barring the gates?
Stop Last of the Giants. Stop Hilly.
Right, yeah.
And stop.
I lost a combo deck in the Westeros League, but that's only because I made a stupid mistake. If I remembered to put a second dupe on Marge in charge, large Marge, I would have won. Because I just outrushed him.
Yeah. So the decks aren't unbeatable. I take the side of being pro Annals more just because so many people are so on the side of anti Annals. But I do understand why people complain about it. I do. It's not that I'm being hipster. I'm just trying to compensate.
James, post-traumatic stress disorder is a very real and very serious mental illness that combo decks cause.
But I do think it would be better if it was you couldn't each player can marshal up to 3 cards from the discard pile as if they were in their hand or something to that effect. I do agree that the card would be better and more fair if it was in that form.
The issue being is like I said when I talked about Howder in the last one. As soon as you don't put a limit on something, it's abusable. There needs to be a limit, and that's the thing. I think if it was you could only play 3 events per phase, I don't think...
3 events per round might be appropriate, but
I would possibly say per phase, because otherwise I think that would neuter this card otherwise, except for that case of I'm going to use my 3 Jakarises twice. That would probably be the only time this would see play then. Possibly.
But yeah, it's a very good, very flexible plot.
Very controversial.
And I think that the fact that whether you like them or not, and obviously understandably a lot of people don't like them, the fact that it has opened up so many different decks to, even if they're just obviously variations on a theme, you've got we can all just rattle off multiple combo decks off the top of our heads that literally wouldn't exist if this plot didn't.
Yeah.
And out of all of the plots that I'm mentioning on my list, it's by far the most specific, but it's also the most important in the decks that it goes in. And so I have no hesitation saying it's the 3rd best plot in the game.
That's fair. And I probably should have it on my list. I did kind of forget it existed because I hit the card.
And yet you both included Heads on Spikes.
Yeah, that doesn't feel... Heads on Spikes generally is an interactive decks, at least. I think that's the difference for me. I like the game to be interactive.
Heads on Spikes is passive power gain.
Yeah, but the decks that run it tend to be interactive. They have characters.
I don't know. I also see it in a lot of decks that don't have any intention on interacting.
No, I think that's fair enough. Yeah. Anyway.
Don't get me wrong. I also think that it is used as the crossing decks trying to get to 15 power as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But it is also included in passive power decks.
Yeah, but they're not as common at the moment. And the thing is, passive power decks at least still have characters on the board generally, so you're still interacting with each other. That's what annoys me the most with the combo.
Yeah, it's not the passive power decks aren't trying to go from 0 to 15 in one turn.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Right.
But
anyway.
I'd almost prefer that. I'd rather get it if you're gonna be playing some silly deck. Then let's at least get this over with quickly, rather than you drip feeding, gaining 2 or 3 power around for 5 or 6 rounds until finally you've kicked away at my corpse enough.
Says the guy who plays builders.
I'll build it as fun though, mate. That's different.
Anyway,
it's only negative when other people are doing
it. Fortunately, my next plot we've already talked about, so we can be quick. My plot number 3 is Wardens of the South.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, number 3, very nice, very nice.
This might be my slightly biased towards playing lots of Tyrell.
But also, this is the fun of having 3 Tyrell players.
Yeah.
I bet all the Stark. I know you play Stark a lot as well, Ben, but I bet all the Stark loyalists are like, how come Wardens of the South is in here twice and Wardens of the North hasn't been mentioned once by any of us?
Because Wardens of the North is pretty good, but Randall Tarley can go into 3 challenges. Thanks to this.
You can do that anyway, can't you?
4 yeah, but for 3. 4 challenges if you've got a, the High Guardian Courtier out.
Oh, yeah.
So,
well, then it's informant, yeah.
Yeah, so, everything we talked about at the beginning of this episode, it just leverages everything Tyrell want to do so well. Basically, it's just a turn of I win the challenges. Mm-hmm. Thanks for coming. Yeah. So we already talked about it though. So Matt, you're number 3.
So my number 3 is the plot that maybe in some ways is kind of pushing Valar Morghulis out of the top spot of being the reset. And that is Valar Dohaeris. I like Valar Dohaeris a lot. I like how it, even more than Valar Morghulis, encourages players to watch and analyze, not only just watch, but analyze the other side of the board, saying, well, what if Valar Dohaeris goes off? How will I end up? And it encourages play styles, it encourages that back and forth fencing play style of trying to edge out each other, knowing that a Valar Dohaeris could drop at any moment. It does.
Sorry, go on.
What's that? No, yeah. Go for it.
I was just to say, it also, more than Valar Morghulis, affects how you do your claim.
Yes.
Because you need to constantly think, what happens if it goes off? I need 10 gold to survive this. If I kill this 4-cost character, or 3-cost character, sorry, and I've only got 7 and a 4-coster left,
what happens if Valar Dohaeris goes
more
off?
Expensive characters feeling like the loss if my opponent doesn't play Valar Dohaeris is not that huge, but the loss if I do it the other way around and my opponent does is so important.
Yeah. Valar Dohaeris, I see it more than Valar Morghulis, even as an equalizer, where you because you can't save from Valar Dohaeris, I see Valar Dohaeris as the equalizer plot that actually, even more than Valar Morghulis, can be used when you're behind to get you back in the game. It also doesn't have the terrible stats that Valar Morghulis has, and I think it's generally the superior, not quite reset, but more as I've been beaten back a bit and I want to equalize, reset the playing field to come back from behind.
I do think you calling it an equalizer sums up to me why I prefer Valar Morghulis.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
I try as a general rule. Obviously, no one's perfect, but I try as a general rule to not fall behind in games. If I'm playing Valar Dohaeris, even though I'm equalizing the board, usually the fact that my opponent had a superior board means that I'm on the back foot on the whole.
Yeah.
Whereas with Valar
that comes down to playstyle. I look at
equalizer or as a leveraging block. Whereas you can't really leverage Valar Dohaeris unless you're location heavy and you're planning on still having a superior board thanks to your locations. You can't really leverage it in the same.
The thing I would say is, sorry.
Oh, that's that. I think that's more of a playstyle thing.
Probably.
I find myself. I think it's my personality and playstyle. I do very well by putting myself in situations where, okay, I see my opponent is going to come at me for military. I'm going to not marshal this character, and I'm gonna see ahead. I'm gonna not marshal this character, keep this in my hand, let this get claimed, then kind of judo, then kind of like do a judo maneuver, play Valor Harris, and then play the character I see.
Matt, I don't know if things are different in the US, but you're not meant to do judo on your opponent in the middle of a game over here. It's considered very poor form.
Oh, in that case, I
depending on the opponent.
Oh, in that case, I.
Yeah, true.
Oh,
if it's Darren Hazelton, go ahead.
Yeah. In that case, I apologize to my opponents over the weekend, especially Dave Bamford, when I just totally judo chopped them in the middle of our Baratheon on Baratheon match yesterday. Sorry, Dave. Yeah.
I do think you're right that it's a playstyle thing, though, because when you describe about how you quite often will like to sort of set up to be able to push hard after your Valor Harris turn.
Yes.
My general preference, I find, is it's not to be short-sighted as such, but to try to make sure every turn I'm making strides towards victory. And that even if my opponent is able to then push me harder, if I've gained an advantage from that turn and I feel confident that I'm going to be able to push to gain an advantage on the next turn as well, they can only pull me back so many times.
Yeah,
but
it's a playstyle thing.
And I that's not to say the way I play is the better way to play. It's just my way.
So the way I've been using this recently is in my Tyrell Crossing deck, the sort of mini curve Knights deck, and I never want to play it. It's not in there for me to leverage it. It's in there in a I generally
it's your old crap button.
Based a little bit. Games I win, I generally win on turn 3. Sometimes turn 2 if everything falls into place, but generally I win turn 3. If things start going a bit wrong, I start noticing around turn 2. I have 2 get out jail free cards, which depending on my opponent's board state, which is this and duel.
Okay.
So basically, whichever one I feel I need to play at that point, and that can then, especially duel. The boards duel quite often ends up being the one I play if they've got big characters, just because it's quite good for that. But yeah, that's what it's there for, and I think it's won me games by then doing that. I've completely knocked their tempo off, especially when people go wide. Because I think, especially when you were playing Crossing and you've got 2 Apple Knights out with Noble Lineage, awesome combo.
They're one of those cards that's the best to be able to save for sure.
Yeah. But people tend to go wide because they feel they need to defend more challenges. At which point, Valor Harris has massive implications. Whereas I'm not really running saves because it's all chuds, and I don't really want my chuds to die because they're really good. So that's why I give Valor Harris. And as you say, if you can have, typically I have like 2 Arbor Knights, so 2 Apple Knights or an Apple Knight and another Knight and like a 4-cost character survive the Valor Harris. And that's I'm generally in a better board state, especially if I've got 3 Knights out and the Arbor Knight the Apple Knight just does 3 challenges next turn without having to kneel.
Yeah. On the subject, Matt, of duel, with confiscation you asterisked with nothing bends like the cold. For your number 4 slot you included noble, trading and late slot. Would you consider making your number 3 Valor Harris or duel depending on your deck, or do you think the Valor Harris is just steps ahead of duel and you'd only go with
the thing about duel is that if your opponent is running like a bunch of say 4-cost characters and is like flooding
or armies, duel
won't save you, where the Harris still will.
Duel, there's been quite a few games duel's been a dead card for me.
Yeah.
And especially at the moment where people are running mini curves. So if someone plays duel against my Knights deck, it does absolutely nothing. I think Valor Harris is better in that regards.
Yeah, because like duel won't save you if your opponent goes like Tywin, Tyrion, Core Cersei, the Hound, for example. It won't save you if your opponent is going like Mace, Wardens of the Reach, in a couple of like Elena's Informants. Yeah, it won't save you there. And then again, the opponent's board can get so big that duel doesn't slow them down very much. Like, let's say you're facing a board of like Tywin, Queen Cersei, Jaime, Tyrion the Hound. Like duels, yeah, and you've got like 2 characters. Yeah, duel's not going to get you back in that game, but Valar Harris will.
That's fair. I mean, on Sunday, my deck ran duel, but not Valar Harris.
Okay,
Really?
well, you're doing like Night's Watch with like you were doing Night's Watch, right?
Yes.
Yeah, which is like that's fine. That makes sense.
I was going to say, I think in retrospect, my deck would have been better if I'd had Valar Harris in that slot.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I consider, at least for my own playstyle, I consider Valar Harris to be the superior equalizer to Valar Morghulis. Yeah.
Okay. So number 2, I guess then.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So my number 2, it's not been mentioned yet by anyone, but I am going to assume that's because it's in everyone else's top 2 as well. I could be wrong. It's a plot we mentioned earlier in the context of Varys' riddle, and it is counting coppers.
I was already waving over it as soon as you said that.
I was thinking, man, it's been a long time, and none of us have mentioned counting coppers yet.
Yeah.
And whoever's the first to mention it, the other 2 of us get to criticize them for putting it so low.
Yes.
Having it as one of the 2 best plots in the game, unless you think it's far and away the best, I think that's a good spot, isn't it?
Why do you hate counting coppers so much?
Yeah, I mean, what can we say? Like, the downsides of it are Varys' riddle and below gold. The upsides of it are draw equals win, and it draws you lots of cards. You can use it early game to give yourself options to play if you're playing a deck that like doesn't need to be able to flood the board quickly. You can use it late game if you need to be able to come back after you've emptied your hand when you've got more econ set up. You can, it's just a great card.
Yeah. Also, it's got the giant reserve. That's very important because that sets you up going into the next turn.
Yeah, and also one thing that I really love about it, and I did try, like, I don't know how you guys treated Limit 1 plots, but I decided I wasn't going to punish plots for being Limit 1 as such, but with certain plots that actually do see play for appearing multiple times, I was going to factor that in.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons Coppers is in my top 2 rather than just in my top 5 or whatever.
Okay, because you can play 2 of
quite
it.
a lot of decks that not only run Coppers but run Coppers then Coppers.
Yeah, no. I think I went for the similar thing. Generally, I wasn't punishing plots that Limit 1 because they're normally really good if they're Limit 1. There's a couple of exceptions like the Baratheon plot. So bad. But yeah, generally, if they're Limit 1, it's because they're good plots. But as you say, being able to take like too much the walls, 2 counting coppers, 2 retaliations, that's a lot of plots which you see people take 2 of. So that obviously is the reason why they're taking 2 of it.
Yeah, and I think since we already mentioned the wars to come before, perhaps unsurprisingly, given this is a plots episode, when we do get the wars to come, I think this is one of those plots that will be seen at 2x in a lot of those decks.
I totally agree.
Pretty much all of them, I'd say. Yeah. I think it's great. This is a plot which has got a lot better because Econ's got better.
Yes. I remember when the core set came out and we were doing the card game DB ratings, I gave it a 5 out of 5, and it saw such little play for the first couple of months in particular that I genuinely thought maybe I'd made a mistake in that. Second edition was a different game to first. Draw maybe not so important anymore. But now that the economy has loosened up a lot, it's become that 5 out of 5 plot and more. Like it really is. I mean, it's in all of our top 2 cards in the game.
Well, in addition, thanks to Valar Morghulis and Valar Harris, you now need to kind of meter out your game and not just flop things on the board.
Yes, that's the other thing, is it's not just about getting as many things on the board as quickly as possible and just making sure that your characters are better than your opponent's characters. It's about balancing cards in hand. It's about making sure you see the key events you need at the right time. It's about finding your locations that are cornerstones to your win condition.
Yeah, so when I got into the game of Core, I wasn't a massive fan of it outside of Lannister. Because obviously Lannister could leverage it, especially got Tyrone.
Lannister was the only one with the econ to make it work, and also Lannister lacked good draw.
Exactly. So, but no, as the game went on, I think it's a card, because you look at the stats, it looks awful, and especially if a newer player, you can think, is 3 cards really worth that little econ?
Well, in a game where your opponent, you and your opponent are both slapping down the biggest boards you can, then that 2 gold really hurts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it did. But I think this is definitely a card where as you understand the game better, you see how important this is. And it's a card which you just, there's very few decks I don't run it in anymore. Very few. There needs to be.
Yeah.
I think maybe Tyrell I don't run it because you've got pleasure barges, you've got insight draw, you've got there's a lot of other ways of getting draw. So I just want got other plots to do other things. But other than that, I think basically every faction I pretty much run it in.
Yeah.
Especially Stark because all their draws bloody conditional.
Yeah. It's also worth noting. I think it was already noted that the 2 gold econ locations really helped increase its stock because now, you're not limited to only doing 3 reducers, 3 rose roads, 3 kings roads.
I think there's also time. I think when Beggar King first came out, that was another card which enabled. This
That's true. Because it overcame that downside of only getting 2 gold.
Well, because you wanted it to be 2 gold because then you got 2 more.
Yeah.
Basically. So it's it's a very very good card, as I think we're probably about to find out. Anything to say before we move on?
No, I mean, if there's anything else, we can say it when it inevitably comes up 2 more times.
Cool. So my number 2 plot has already been mentioned. It's not counting coppers. It's Valor Harris.
Yeah.
I currently think it's the best reset in the game.
So do I.
Possibly. Now, I did have a little shake of confidence in this because I think the Martel Wolf decks we're starting to see might mean this sees less play.
Okay.
I don't know because they're doing a really good job of clearing the board. A frustratingly good job of clearing the board. So yeah, but no, I just say everything was mentioned it before. I think it's the downside to Valor Magoris is generally if your opponent's got more saves than you, it's hard to leverage it. There's games where I've had Valor, but I've had 1 or 2 saves, and my opponent's got 3 duped characters and a bodyguard, and I'm like, well, I'm going to come off worse from this Valor. So is it worth doing it? I want to try and time it for their Valor if they're running Valor. Whereas Valor de Harris does not care because you can't save. It's just literally pick 10 gold. I do think, and we kind of mentioned this on First Snow, this and First Snow probably in hindsight should have come out the other way around. Yeah. This is the card we needed during Cycle 1 when Lannister was just putting up big character after big character. And I think it would have been better for new players then, people just getting into the game, because, although your characters aren't saved, they're also not killed.
Yes, it's a good it's a great equalizer, and it doesn't knock you out of the game by, killing your important character. Yeah.
So I know we've already talked about it a lot, but I went off Valor. Just quickly, I didn't talk about this before. I went off Valor Harris after it initially came out. I wasn't seeing its impact, and I still, I don't know if I'm overly careful about it. I've still not had a game where it's completely crushed me. But I've had games where it's completely crushed my opponents.
Okay.
So take that for as you.
Yeah. Now that Counting Coppers has been mentioned, I will say that Valor de Harris actually, for my, just with my playstyle, it's made me run Counting Coppers even more because it helps with that. Okay, I'm going to back off a little bit, drop a little bit of tempo, get my opponent to overcommit, and then I'm going to hit them back with, say, Valor de Harris.
One of my favourite things about Coppers is when you flip it and your opponent didn't flip a reset that round, be that Morgulis or de Harris, you're like, okay, good. My opponent probably can't really justify flipping a reset next round either.
Yes. No, I definitely agree. Cool. Matt, your number 2.
My number 2 is one that has been mentioned, and I consider it at the moment at least, the premier economy card in the game. And that's Trade Routes.
Okay. Yeah.
Enough said.
Anything else we want to add from before, or are we leaving it there?
I'm going to say that now that we're having discussions now that we've had a few discussions about my own personal playstyle, Trade Routes really fits. Where it's like I'm gonna hang back a little bit, and then I'm going to try to equalize with Valor de Harris, and then I'm going to really push with Trade Routes in like turn 4 or 5. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So quickly onto the honourable mentions.
Yes.
I was going to say, I think me and Matt are going to go first because you've got a long list.
Sure,
Mm-hmm.
that's fine by me.
But just very quickly, my ones are very simple. Clash of Kings, which almost made the list.
Yes.
I love
yes.
that. I love that plot. Go first. You can choose to go first. Bar one or two other plots, and power is what wins you the game. And I still get people who forget it works on defense. It still amazes me. That plot's been out for what 3 years or 2.5 years now.
Well, the length of the game.
Yeah, people still forget it does that. Anyway,
I also have Clash of Kings on my honourable mentions list.
As do I.
Besieged.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's a plot I've been loving. It's got good stats, and forcing your opponent to defend can sometimes just be great, especially if you can leverage other nil effects like Intimidate or Brathian nil effects or R'hllor and Intimidate.
Mm-hmm.
Supporting the Faith is a card I've been enjoying a lot more recently.
Yeah.
It's a great counter to Flea Bottom.
I was almost expecting it to be on Matt's list.
I was as well. That's why I thought
it's the 4 reserve.
It was you want to be running out of range or later in the game.
Yeah.
It was there floating around number 10. I went, I won't put it on because Matt will talk about it. I'll put another plot on to talk about it. Trade routes, which I've already mentioned, and one which I'm kind of surprised hasn't come up because it's quite common. The long plan.
Yeah.
I really rate the long plan.
The thing about the long plan is it's not dramatic.
Yeah, but we talk about how counting coppers. The long plan. So that's the other one. When the long plan came out, I started running counting coppers in Martel because I would just sit there, sit on about 5 gold, and then next turn counting coppers being 7 gold was really good.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah.
This is true. I think possibly because of the fact that we've had more econ come out, long plan has gotten worse. Like around cycle 1, cycle 2 time, it was in every Martel deck. Yeah. Now it's not in every Martel deck, but it's still a very good card.
I think there's also an argument that obviously Martel have the best econ location.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the best.
It's definitely up there. Maybe
it's not the Night's Watch.
Maybe
it's top 2.
Maybe find out in a future top 10. But I think that probably has knocked it off, because it can be a bit of a tempo hit, but when it works, and also a lot of opponents just go, you know what, I'm not going to do a challenge.
I mean, you're fine with that too.
Yeah.
When we get someone always tells, it might come back into the forefront as well. That's one of the ways that you can actually use that event.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, your honorables?
Yeah, my honorables that haven't been mentioned already include Retaliation. I think that's it's a very solid 2-claim plot. Useful for when you want to go second and then you just hit your opponent back really hard. We've already talked about Wardens of the South. It didn't make my list because it's Tyrell only. Clash Kings versus Riddle.
Stark only.
Oh, I'm saying Wardens of the South.
South. Sorry, I thought North. Sorry.
Versus Riddle. Clash Kings. I also want to add Filthy Accusations as a very solid reason to run Reigns of Castamere.
Mm-hmm.
Filthy Accusations is a very key part of doing your power turn of okay, I'm gonna roll in, I'm gonna kneel that guy, and then I'm gonna do another challenge, and I'm gonna
That's interesting. I think Filthy's dropped off a bit because there's so much stand now.
Even so, it's the mid challenge Filthy Accusations.
Yeah, but there's still a lot of stand.
But it's the mid challenge Filthy.
I've had a lot of games where I'm like, well, I'm only really doing this so you can only stand that character once.
Yeah. But if you're doing your power turn, they're going to stand it anyway.
Yeah, I don't like really the argument of stand as saying therefore kneel effects are bad, because they were still having that stand effect whether you knelt or not. It's if you kneel Randall, even if they stand Randall again, then they were going to trigger to stand Randall, and now you've used up one of the stands.
I'm not saying it's bad. It's still in every single Reigns deck I do. I'm just thinking its effect is definitely not as impactful as it was.
Yeah, that's why it's my honorable mentions instead of my top 10. It wasn't the core set.
That's fair.
Yeah, if this was the core set, Filthy Accusation, absolutely. Remember when it was a 2 of in every Baratheon deck?
Yeah, it was Generous Noble Cause, Filthy, Feast of Crows.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the last one I'd like to present as an honorable mention is Winter Festival, as representing passive power plots that have pretty decent stats.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that There is a plot that I was sure you were going to bring up. In fact, there are a couple of plots I was sure you were going to bring up.
Ooh,
But
tell me more.
I forgot one.
You-
I forgot
yeah.
quickly. A Time of Wolves. I think that's a very underrated plot,
Yeah.
and I think it's a plot we're all going to get very used to soon.
I mean, it's a plot. It's one of those plots where when direwolves are good, it is good. When direwolves aren't good, it isn't good.
It's not.
And unless you're Sam Bratz, up to the point we're recording, direwolves haven't been good. Possibly the new Nymeria that changes.
I don't think it's just for that. The ability to go and fetch a summer from your deck at will, who I still think is the best direwolf.
Yeah, I mean, I won a regional last year with a deck that only ran a Time for Wolves to fetch summer, so I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then of course, like if you've already drawn Summer, Lady is great. Yeah.
Who runs Lady?
If you draw Summer, you sacrifice him,
Yeah.
and then you use Flea Bottom to trigger him. He goes on the bottom of your deck, and then you use Time for Wolves to go and get him again.
Oh yes.
So you're saying Time for Wolves as the summer search engine?
Yeah.
Basically, it should be a time for summer.
Very occasionally, it is a time for Grey Wind dupe.
Yes. Time for Greywood.
Or a time for what's it, Direwolf Pup, because you really can't get anything else out.
So James, what you're saying is missing from my honorable mentions list. I want to hear this.
I will get to that because I will be very surprised if Coppers isn't your number one, given that it wasn't even in your honorable mentions list. So given that, there are a couple that I'm surprised, but I'll talk about one of them more in a moment.
Okay.
For now, my honourable mentions for the honourable mentions were A Noble Cause, A Song of Summer, Barring the Gates, Blood of the Dragon, Calling the Banners, Calm Over Westeros, Close Call, Confiscation, Duel, Heads on Spikes for the Watch and Wardens of the North.
It sounds like pretty much my entire list. Okay.
Then my honourable mentions proper were A Clash of Kings, as discussed.
Yeah.
Filthy Accusations for the same reason as Matt. I think that, more so than Power Behind the Throne, was the primary reason why Reigns was so good for so long and is still good now.
Yeah.
Retaliation, because I think it is the best unconditional two-claim plot in the game.
Just quickly, I think there's only one deck that Power Behind the Throne is better than Filthy in at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that is out of Greyjoy, because being able to get Ash into 3 challenges to get 3 lots of draw.
Oh, for the draw. Yeah, it makes sense.
Bonkers good.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I agree.
Retaliation is the for me, the best two-claim plot in the game. And then the one that I was surprised you didn't mention as an honourable mention, Matt, the Withering Cold.
I haven't had enough experience with it to quite put it up there yet. It's my favorite plot to play with right now, but it's still its place. It could be number 4. It could also be number junk. I haven't quite figured it out yet.
I'm also thinking, I don't necessarily think Counting Coppers is Matt's number 1.
Interesting.
I think there's a chance. You've not done Nothing Burns Like the Cold, have you?
No, he had that as an asterisk on his confiscation choice.
Oh, damn it. Okay. I was thinking because he loves that plot.
I love Nothing Burns, but it's not number 1.
That is his silver hairnet of plots.
No, because Nothing Burns is good.
Yeah,
Silver Hairnet isn't.
That's the only difference. Otherwise, it is the same.
But yeah, Withering Cold. In my very limited experience from this most recent weekend of playing Thrones, it is a big part of Baratheon being good again.
Do you think that's why they won the that big tournament in America?
Thrones War. I think it's a big part of why they did so well at Thrones War and why they did so well at the weekend. I mean, Baratheon. There was a point on the Saturday when out of the 4 Baratheon decks that had been brought to the tournament, all 4 of them were on tables 1 through 4.
That's true.
And one of them made the cut. 2 of them only missed on strength of schedule. And then on the Sunday, Matt made the cut again with Barra, and also Dave Bamford was the only House with the Red Door Exodia deck to make the cut.
Yeah, but his was on the backs of Black Betha.
Yes, he kept getting Black Betha as his House of Dreams extension, and it kept being amazing. But I let's not go too much into that because I'm sure he'll want to cover it on banter for obvious reasons. Yeah. But Withering Cold was a huge plot. I know, Matt, you loved it.
Yeah, I still do.
Ked loved it. Yeah. I know Dave loved it in his Barra that he played on both days. It's been such a key card for Neil, and I think the repercussions of it are still being felt with it only having come out in the last pack, and I kind of actually feel guilty for only making it an honourable mention.
See, I've not actually faced it yet. This is really
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It takes some work to like really wrap your head around it.
I have a feeling this is a bit like when the Stark box first came out, and no one really knew exactly what to do with all these cards.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like Winterfell was slated when that box first came out.
I gave it 5.
I know. Okay, I know. Slated by quite a lot of people in general. It got bad, and then people started realizing how good some of these Stark cards were, and it just took a couple of packs. Afterwards, and then all of a sudden Stark appeared.
Yeah, I think possibly Solis and Dragonstone Castle might be the reason why people now start playing Barrymore, but then the Withering Cold will be the reason why them playing Barra actually works out for them. Yeah. That's my prediction.
Yeah,
it's only a prediction; it could be wrong.
Yeah, it would be somewhere on my list if I had shaken out exactly where it goes yet, but I haven't. But it takes a lot of work to like really wrap your head around it and how to play it well. And I'm not even there yet. Like, I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet.
Well then, let's round this out. So, Whammer, your number 1 plot is...
My number 1 plot is one that you have both included on your lists. And obviously, you've included it far too low because you're damn fools. It is the best plot card in the game, March to the Wall.
Oh, really? March
to the Wall.
Yeah,
as you said. It dictates every setup in every game you play unless you categorically know your opponent isn't running March to the Wall. In fact, not knowing your opponent isn't running March to the Wall is one of the most powerful bits of information you as a player can have.
That's true.
There have been numerous games against Keb, because Keb isn't such a fan of March to the Wall, where I have been able to, knowing that, set up a 7-coster as my only character, and that 7-coster has run the game for me.
Yeah. No, that's fair. There's it's definitely fair.
On top of that, we discussed its application with First Snow of Winter. We've been talking about how aggro might come back now with like the direwolves and stuff. It's fantastic with those. It has the cannot be saved that you both have praised Valor de Harris for. It goes really well with your own chuds to be able to march for Flea Bottom. If you can get the opponent's board down to that level and clear out their, double dupe Tywin or whatever, that's a backbreaking play. It has good enough gold that you can open with it without fear, but also great initiative so that you can use it to win initiative on a key round where the turn order really matters. It's a fantastic plot, absolutely fantastic. And the piece de resistance, and the reason why it was my number 1 rather than just a number, top 5 or whatever, is like Coppers that you can run 2 copies of it in a deck. I've had so many games where I've been running double marched and I've played a marched, and then my opponent has, talking out loud to themselves, gone, well, you've played your marched, so I guess I can do this. And then in the plot phase, it comes around, I play my second march, and they get cross with themselves.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I say that comes down to experience, but yeah, I've seen that a lot. It's something I'm always, until I see 2 as a plot, I always assume.
Yeah.
You've got 2 counting coppers, fine. I don't have to worry about anything else now. No,
even if they see it coming, it's still there's only a limit to how much you can do about it.
Yeah, that's true.
Matt, isn't it annoying that you use your own arguments against us? You both mentioned it not being saved is a fantastic thing. I'm like, fair enough.
Yeah, that's true.
No, it's a very good plot. I guess as well, board state's a lot smaller than they used to be, which makes this better.
Yes. It other than as a post-First Snow plot, it lost a lot of luster around the time of the big board Lanny dominance type phase. Now that routinely people only have 2 or 3 characters on the board, getting to take one of those out is huge.
No, I agree. No, I think that's all very fair, and I can see why. I mean, I think we all had it in our top 10s, didn't we? So
yes.
Oh yeah.
This isn't.
I'm the 3rd person to mention it.
This isn't like the last one where it was in spoilers. We all had, I think, 2 of our number 1s. No one else had them on their list.
All 3 of our number 1s were not in either of the others' top 10s when we did the characters, which was fascinating.
That was fascinating. So no, cool, fair enough. Well, my number 1 has been mentioned, and it's no surprise. It is Summons to Court. No, it's counting. It's counting coppers. What basically the deciding factor for me was other than fact draws king. What plot is more copied in this game by Varys' Riddle?
Counter cop.
Yeah, counter copper. If you can counter pulling the strings and Varys' Riddle go after this because cards are good.
Yeah.
The more cards you have, the better position you're in. Simple as. And again, it's very interesting. I look at my progression through the game, and at the very probably when Core first came out, I don't know. This might have been like 10th. Maybe it might have been an honorable mention.
Yeah, well, we discussed why because of the way the core set was.
But as I've played more, it's become more and more important. And I think it's if you're not running this, you need a really good reason not to be running this.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, you're number one.
Would you believe me if I said it was counting coppers?
I would. I would believe you.
I would believe you, yes.
Okay, good. It is.
Counting coppers, yeah. Cool. Well, I think unlike the last one, it's all made. Our number one, well, two of the number ones were Warhammer's number two, so
it's very clear which one's on top, and that's Summoner Court because that's God tier.
Yes, God.
Yeah.
But
But in the realm of mortals, it's counting coppers.
Yeah, one thing I will say about Marched, in its defense over counting coppers, you talk about how Varys's riddling the coppers is just a great play. March to the Wall is so good that your opponent doesn't even want to riddle it because it only fucks them over even more.
Yes. The amount of times where that people have riddled a march and gone, oh, cack. But at the same time, you can leverage it the other way as well.
Like if your opponent's gonna gonna march and leave their Tywin on the board, you can go, oh baby.
Yeah. No.
But yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier how as an anti-Varys riddle point, how I'd fucked up against Evan by predicting coppers and it actually being marched to the wall.
Yeah.
No, definitely. Oh, cool. Well, there we go, guys. There's our list, which, if you're watching the video version of this, I'll be doing some nice graphics and the write-up of each person's list. But otherwise, let us know what your ones are. We want to see. We want to stir up some controversy, and we want to get many perspectives on this very important subject. And we'd like to see what the community thinks. I think definitely we want to get a community top 10 list, which we'll either do in another podcast or we'll do at the start of the next top 10. We'll have a quick rundown of what the community top 10 was.
If you're okay with it, Ben, I'd quite like to be in charge of managing the community top 10 list because I'm looking forward to being a stat sheet.
That sounds like a lot of work, so please do.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to getting to sort of trend certain things and get a deep dive in a way that no one except me will find interesting.
This is great because now I'm allowed to do this. I can suggest an idea. Is there any way you could track it by region as well?
Oh, we're not going to have enough data points. We're going to need a lot of data points to make that work.
But I'd like to know what like Europe and like America, for instance, maybe and Asia, all think have different opinions on the plots if possible.
It would be very interesting if like there's one small town or something, presumably like Warsaw in America, where it's like naval superiority #1.
Yeah, still sod you summer and winter plots. Cool. Well, guys, thank you for coming on. This is something I've wanted to do for a while.
Good.
And I would say, guys, do try it. It's not as easy as you think it is. I mean, this one was probably easier than the first one we tried because there's only 98 plots, including ones that haven't been released yet.
Yeah, 91 currently released at the time of recording.
So I was just going by when I typed into FrameDB, it said there was 98, but obviously 7 of them are not out yet.
Or draft only.
Or draft only, sorry. So when you have to whittle down like a 400 or 500 characters, it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
But no,
there was a lot less crossover in the character one. I'm looking forward to when it's been long enough since we did that list that we can go back to that one.
Well, I think we're going to split it, aren't we? Do top 4 cost and above and 3, or maybe 4 cost and lower and 5 and above, or there'll be a divide to make it a bit more interesting for us, and also I think just to make it a bit more manageable. Because
and also it's not just the manageability, but also it's so tough to even begin to compare like who's better out of. Robert Baratheon and Summer or something like that.
Or the reducers.
Number one, dude. Number one. But and also we are just trying to decide what to do next. If you have any suggestions, do post them to us. You can suggest what we do next.
If we don't get any suggestions, we're going to go with the default, and that's going to be top 10 versions of Melisandre.
I was going to go top 10 versions that Matt likes that Whammer hates.
Top 10 characters that have a second copy of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Top 10 Neil effects.
Top 10 Neil effect. Top 10 dominance cards. Oh yeah. We're cool. Well, guys, I think Rama, thank you very much for coming on.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.
Matt, as always, it has been entertaining.
Thanks.
And as always, guys, it has been emotional.